Hey, what's going on everybody? John Corey, LCDC3 and student nurse here. Today's video, we're going to dive into stigma. I really believe this is the #1 reason that people who need help do not get it. It's absolutely terrorizing mental health, and as we conquer stigma, we really see a lot more people get involved into treating their mental health crisis as they should be. Statistic that only 10% of people with an addiction problem to a substance get into a place for help because they're so worried about the fear, the guilt, the shame that they'll feel when they realize and open up about their addiction and the things they need help with. So, first thing we're going to look at is I want to differentiate stigma into the neuroscience of stigma as well as the psychosocial part of stigma. So, neuroscience really looking at the brain, what structures are active and inactive that contribute to the power of stigma, as well as the psychological principles behind stigma. Okay, so looking at the neuroscience of addiction, it's very important to remember that the brain, we can monitor which parts of the brain are on, and when we feel fear, when we feel shame, when we feel guilt about opening up and being honest with the things we're struggling with, we actually get the deeper part of our brain, the middle part, really the emotional center of our brain comes on very actively. When this happens, the outer part of our brain, which is responsible for critical thinking, problem solving, all of the things that allow us to really go to the next level and conquer the problems we have, turn off. So the inner part is very highly stimulated. Now what this means is that it's very important to remember that drug addiction, early on, these are the first centers that are compromised in drug addiction. So when we make someone feel fear, feel pain, fear guilt, we trap them into the center part of their brain where they can't problem solve. They can't do the things that they need to get out of this rut. And when that happens, what's the quickest thing to comfort them? Well, that center part that's naturally already programmed for addiction is being fueled and localized to the middle. So this is just another very important part to remember, that you've got your inner part of your brain and your outer part. When we feel fear, shame, or guilt from other people pressing that negative opinion on us, we localize the brain to that inner part of our brain where we cannot problem solve. We can't do anything except try and figure out a way to get away from that pain, that fear, and that guilt. Easiest thing for someone addicted to drugs to do, jump to the drugs. So very important to remember this. Now, conversely, when we lead with a supportive understanding and we listen attentively to people and the problems they're going through, like someone trying to get over their addiction, we go to that outer part of the brain, that part of the brain that only humans have, where we can problem solve, we can plan, we can systematically get a plan in action that's not only going to get them out of the rut that they're in, but make sure that they do not continue using or doing the behaviors that we're so trying to get over. So very important to remember that the prefrontal cortex and the center part of the brain, they are battling. And as a clinician, as a friend, as a support system, you have to remember, we do not want people in that center part of the brain. If they're in that center part of the brain, you've defeated yourself. You want to get them out of that center part of the brain toward the outer part, the prefrontal cortex. You do this through understanding, through love, through support, through kindness, through just listening and saying, there is a way out of this. Next, we're going to take a look at the psychosocial elements of stigma. Now, it's very important to remember that when we feel rejected, when we feel misunderstood, this is actually when we are at our saddest. And in this moment, in this time when we are really trying to open up about the things that are bothering us, the things that are really limiting us from being all that we can be, we need to be understanding, we need to be open, we need to be honest, and we need to be understanding that this person has been through things that are limiting them, and it's created a crutch, and that drug addiction can be very managed if we just listen to them. So now the psychological principle of rejection and misunderstanding is very, very understood, and what we know is that in these things, if you have to hide that you're in recovery, that you have a drug problem, that you have some kind of problem that you need attention, it's only going to take away if you have to hide that, because psychologically you're telling yourself, hey, this is not going to be heard well, and because it's not going to be heard well, I have to hide it. That isolation principle, as we know, we are most dangerous when we are isolated. They've done study after study showing that people who remain isolated, they go crazy. You go crazy because without having someone to bounce ideas off, bounce honesty off, bounce how you're feeling off, you internalize this isolative, all alone situation, and it really does. It turns us all crazy. So it's very important to remember that psychological principle of remaining isolated about your recovery, about maybe a medication you're on, about just opening up and about expressing your feelings, that creates that isolation, and that can lead to physical isolation, which ultimately will lead in the demise and absolute downfall of that person. So the grand message of all of this is really the cost. What is this costing us? Well, 62,000 people in 2018 were reported to have an overdose death. That's quite a few people. They think the reports of that are actually 2 to 3 times higher. Not all reports go reported, so we know that these numbers are probably a lot higher than they're being reported. Fentanyl is absolutely out of this world with how much of it is in circulation into all the drugs now. And with fentanyl comes a rate of death that we've never seen. As you can see from the chart, the line is such an exponential growth in deaths from fentanyl. We really need to crush this stigma because, like I said, only 10% of people get into recovery that have a problem. So by crushing stigma, we get people into the place that they need to be so that we can flatten this curve for addiction deaths and really help, even families and communities heal together. And another big problem is youth heroin growth. At the facility I work at, we see a lot of the trauma, a lot of the same cycle. When you don't crush this cycle, it's passed down through families, through communities, and through that, you really magnify what was one addiction of one person. Rubs off to kids, rubs off to grandchildren, and as it grows, the whole community is really compromised from being a healthier and better adjusted community. Now, just another look at the cost. Obviously human life is the most invaluable thing that we have, but just to put it in a dollar figure, we spend $179 billion per year in the cost of this opiate crisis, and mostly that's powered by stigma. So some things that this breaks that down into is mortality, healthcare costs, the loss of productivity from people just being sick and not getting into the care that they need, as well as the criminal justice system and child and family assistance, as well as education. Billions and billions and billions of dollars are being pretty much burned when they could be put into a much better cause if we could crush stigma. So this is just another reason why we need to absolutely annihilate stigma in mental health. So last point is all around the solution. How can we get rid of stigma? So for clinicians, for friends, for support systems, you need to be very, very open and understanding that other people are going to have problems. If it's a drug addiction, behavior addiction, any kind of thing that might have, if they open that up to you, look at that like a sign of confidence. It's amazing that that person would open up to you and express like a deep, dark demon to you and look to you for reconciliation. So for clinicians, you really need to analyze what's going on. You need to look at their environment. You need to look at their support system, their time management, their hobbies, all of the things that are little puzzle pieces to putting together this solution for that person. If you just cut them off and say, hey, you messed up, I'm sorry, we're kicking you out of the facility, you're not doing anything except taking a small problem and magnifying it to a bigger one. And it's so important to remember that because the cost is not just with the individual, but every person that they're affiliated with is going to suffer in some way or another. Their coping mechanisms is another big one. Deep breathing, meditation, teaching these behaviors that can get them past cravings, past all of the things that we know drug addiction preys on, and that is quick, impulsive behavior. And really maximizing that therapeutic alliance. If you sit there and when someone relapses, when someone opens up about a problem, when you listen attentively, when you really divulge and understand what they're going through, you build a relationship that is not only therapeutic for that person, but it's therapeutic for you because you're able to look at another person's problems, apply your skills to help them solve it, and then that translates right into your skill ability, into your ability to not only listen and reflect, but to help others. And that's the highest level clinician skill that you can attain. And lastly is asking about their recovery. If you hear someone is in addiction, if someone brings that up to you, ask them how they're doing. Don't be so quick to say, oh, you're on that medication, or oh, you've got a mental health problem. Don't ever do that. You're going to do nothing but damn them to the same cycle that allows this whole process to continue to grow. So listen, ask them about their recovery, what they've learned, how counseling's going, what the medication is like. Don't ever think that you know something from an opinion. Always ask, always be introspective, and always realize that you have the ability to really affect not only that person, but the whole world. So guys, thank you again so much. I really appreciate your time. Please guys, we want to know what you think. So like, comment, subscribe, and just stay tuned. Thank you.